all, thank you very much to all of our candidates. Obviously, this race is for Florida Congressional District 2 representative. These people travel a little farther than what our local candidates do, and this is our third in a series of political debates put on by the Washington County Republican Executive Committee. Coming up, we'll have some of the other races, but arguably this race definitely is one that we're going to want to watch. All four of these candidates are Republicans. For my edification, there is a Libertarian still in the race. So this will go all the way to the general because of that Libertarian. Ordinarily, this race would be obviously decided in the primary, but that will not be the case. We have Brett Butler, who is currently one of our City of Chipley City Councilmen, and he will be our official timekeeper. You will have a minute to introduce yourself, and then you'll have a minute to answer each question respectively. Brett will tell you, if he remembers, hopefully, that you'll have 10 seconds left, and then he'll tell you when you're out of time. We realize that a minute goes awfully quick, but we feel this is the most effective way, and bear in mind that you can use your minute to address any issue, not necessarily the question that was posed to you. But we will ask a question. We'll start with Mary Thomas when we do start the questions, and then 2, 3, and 4 successively. The next question will start with Ken in position number 2, so everybody will have a chance to answer their respective question first in sequence. All right, to start with, Ms. Thomas, if you'll go ahead, you have 1 minute to introduce yourself.
Do we have to turn it on?
You're alive, I believe.
My name is Mary Thomas. I'm a Christian, constitutional, conservative Republican, a wife, a mother, and a property rights attorney. And I have served as the top attorney for Governor Rick Scott. I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, to immigrant parents who came to this country legally from India in 1972, and they built a family medical practice from the ground up. I got my job working for Governor Scott, not because of who I knew or through political patronage, but by applying online, and I was interviewed and hired based upon my merits. I am running for Congress to save the American dream for my son Luke and the next generation, so that they can have the same opportunities that this great country has provided to me and my family. But today, that dream, our Constitution, Christianity, and America itself are under attack.
Thank you, ma'am.
I hope to have your support.
Mr. Sakai.
Thank you. My name is Ken Sakaya. I was the U.S. Attorney here under the first President Bush, and I have spent most of my life fighting on the front lines for the conservative causes that I believe in and that I hold dear. I, too, came to Christ when I was in college. I have committed myself to serving Him in a number of capacities, including fighting Planned Parenthood in an intense trial, defending the Parental Notice of Abortion Act in Florida, representing George W. Bush as his federal trial attorney in the 2000 recount battle, and fighting Obamacare 6 years ago when I was called in to assist the legal team that was bringing a case against Obamacare that came to the Supreme Court. So I thank you for the opportunity. I'm very heartened that so many people are here, and I just very much appreciate the opportunity to help you learn a little bit more about myself. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Dunn.
Thank you very much. My name is Neil Dunn. I'm a sergeant, a veteran, and a businessman from Bay County. I'm also a conservative Republican running for Congress because I believe that the country is worth fighting for. We have a nation that is in danger, but it's a danger not because of bad people doing bad things. It's a danger because of good people who watch and do nothing. We have a president who has substituted executive directives for laws. He has strangled the economy. He has destroyed healthcare, and he's gutted the military. We need to restore this country to the country it used to be. I want my country back, and I know you want your country back too. It's good to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We'll finish up with you, Mr. Moran.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Moran. I'm a retired law enforcement officer. I'm a successful small business owner, and I'm what we call a blue-collar conservative. I'm just a regular guy. I'm what the Founding Fathers envisioned when they set up the House of Representatives, someone that reflects the voters of the district. What's important to me? The same thing that's important to everyone else out there. National security, jobs, the economy, but most importantly, getting this country back to basics, back on track that we've gotten off from. As a business owner, I know what it's like to try to keep a business open, keep the doors open in an economy like this. I also know what it's like to deal with government regulations and the attorneys that they sick on you when you're trying to run a business. As a law enforcement officer, I know what it's like to serve. I'm used to running in when everyone else is running out. I will take that same determination to Washington, D.C. to fight for you and to fight for the Constitution as it was written. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'd ask going forward that you hold your applause until the end of the debate, just so that we can get as many questions in as possible. These questions were submitted, many in email, some tonight. All will be submitted in writing and then asked by me as moderator. We've found that eliminates some of the mean-spirited questions and takes out some of that factor that we try to eliminate as a fair and balanced debate. And so we'll start with you, Ms. Thomas, with the first question. Some of these questions actually were repeat, so in some cases these are homogeneous, joining several different thoughts or questions. The Affordable Health Care Act, or Obamacare, is a politically charged hot potato. What will you do as U.S. representative to change, support, or abolish Obamacare?
Well, my parents are both physicians and small business owners, and they have seen the negative effects of Obamacare, not only on our healthcare system, but also on our small businesses. The taxes and regulations are killing us. And I have always said that I believe in fully and immediately repealing Obamacare. And we need to get back to the free market as much as we can and look at a bill such as H.R. 2300, which is a patient-centered, market-driven approach. It would actually save trillions of dollars, cover the same amount of people currently covered under Obamacare, but it would do it under a free market system. It would force the insurance companies to compete against each other, so we would be able to have better rates and decreased premiums. We need to bring the free market and get the federal government out of our lives as much as possible. And in Congress, I will support fully and immediately repealing Obamacare.
Thank you, ma'am. Same question, Ken, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I believe Obamacare is an effort to basically support Obama's agenda to redistribute the wealth in our country. And if you look at what's happened to our premiums under Obamacare, they have gone up, not just the premiums gone up dramatically, but the deductibles have gone up as well. And I think you may have seen that already in your own lives. And I think what it's doing is it's squeezing the middle class and causing them to fall under severe, heavy burdens. There is another effect, and that is that it has reduced dramatically the number of hours that our workers are working. And that's because if you have more than 50 employees, and it's also limiting the number of employees that small and medium-sized businesses can have. So I fully support repealing it and getting rid of it as soon as possible, because I think it is an inappropriate intrusion of the federal government into our private healthcare system.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Dunn.
Thank you. So I actually support repeal and replace of Obamacare as well. However, I bring to it the perspective of a surgeon. I have watched in the last 5 years as Obamacare has grown like a cancer on our healthcare system, and it is now failing everyone, and the costs are spiraling out of control. Quite literally, no one is benefiting from this system, and it is breaking the bank of our great nation. We can replace this with a system that is patient-centered, market-driven, and responds to the needs of patients, not government bureaucrats. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Jeff, you have last word on that question.
I think anybody would be crazy to sit up here and tell you anything other than repeal and replace Obamacare. Of course, that's what we need to do. There's some simple solutions that we can do. When we talk about replace, I question what that means. I don't want to replace it with another government program. What we all want from our healthcare system is to make sure that it's affordable and accessible. You do that by opening the insurance across state lines. You look at why the healthcare costs are up as they are. That's one of the things. The other thing we must look at is tort reform. That's one of the other things that's driving up the cost of healthcare. Well, I agree with what everyone else here says. There's one exception that I hear that no one has benefited from this. The insurance companies have.
10 seconds.
And why have the insurance companies have? Because they've had a hold of our Congress, of our legislators for too many years, and we need to take that away from them, and we need to make health care no more difficult to
Thank you, sir.
than car insurance.
We'll start with Ken Sakaya on the next question. And obviously this was going to be asked. Just this week we experienced one of the worst mass killings in the history of the United States right here in Orlando, but just one of many such events over the last several years. What is your stance on gun control?
I am a strong proponent of the Second Amendment. Our founding father said that free people ought to not only be armed, but they ought to have sufficient arms to defend that independence, not only from foreign governments, but from their own government itself. And there's a reason it was put into our Constitution. That was the reason. The first thing that an oppressive government does, it takes over the guns, the weapons of its citizens. And stop and think about what it would be like if you were told you could not have a weapon to defend yourself as you go through this life, if you knew you needed one. And so the question being, how do I feel about gun control? That's how I feel. But I would say that as the U.S. Attorney for this district, I put foreign and domestic terrorists behind bars. I prosecuted the narco-terrorists who were invading our shores. I prosecuted the Jamaican posse that...
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I too am a strong proponent of the Second Amendment. I think in the specific instance that you brought up, the Orlando shooting, had some of the people been carrying weapons, it may not have had 50 dead. I think we should be allowed to protect ourselves in our homes and in public. We need to protect that. And also, to put this in context, I have a gun hanging in my living room that was surrendered to George Washington by General Cornwallis at Yorktown. It hangs there to remind us of the importance of free men and women being armed to protect themselves from tyrants and from people like that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran.
Let's make sure that we don't confuse gun control and the Second Amendment with domestic terrorism. As a law enforcement officer, I know that you don't have to go through proper channels to possess a firearm, to acquire a firearm. So many of our law enforcement individuals here know exactly how that is. It's not about keeping the guns out of the hands of good people. We need to make sure that we take care of this at the cause, at the root. If we can't even say what this is, radical Islamic terrorism, how are we going to fight it? If you don't know your enemy, you can't win. If you can't even say your enemy's name, there's no way we're going to win. As a law enforcement officer, I saw a lot of horrific crimes. I've never seen anything on this magnitude. I hope I never do. If you send me to Washington, I'll do everything I can to make sure no one ever sees something like this again.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas, you have the last word on this question.
I am a strong constitutional conservative, and I support defending all of our constitutional rights, including our Second Amendment rights. And what happened in Orlando was really a travesty. But that was caused by the acts of an evil person and radical Islamic terrorists. It wasn't caused because of guns. When President Obama issued his latest unconstitutional executive order, I didn't just say I wanted to protect the Second Amendment. I went on ABC News and gave a constitutional conservative's point of view. I talked about the president's overreach and how it's Congress's duty to defend our rights and liberties. Our current Congress won't do this, but as your representative, I will. And I will protect our constitutional and God-given rights to protect ourselves, our families, and our property.
10 seconds.
We need to keep our country safe from radical Islamic terrorism.
Thank you, ma'am. And Dr. Dunn, you'll be first on this question. The Obama administration marshaled a huge campaign war chest and a large media effort to defeat Steve Sutherland, previously holding the seat of Florida CD2 representative. To what do you attribute the fact that there's no Democrat candidate for this office during this election cycle?
Thank you. The straightforward reason that this is a Republican seat now is because of redistricting. The history of redistricting cannot be addressed in a one-minute answer, but this district is now, instead of R+2, that means leaning 2% to the Republican side, it leans 20% to the Republican side. So I'm certain that the Democrats looked at it and said, don't think any Democrat can win in this district. It is a homogeneously conservative district. And that's a good thing. That means we don't have to pander to any liberals. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran.
I think they're not running because they know they can't win. I like to think that we've educated the people here in North Florida, and now they understand what it really means to be an American, and they understand the agenda and what we're doing and what we want to do to fight to preserve their rights. We need to make sure that Congress is reflective of the people in the district. That's what I want to do. I want to make sure that your voice is heard, and I truly believe that I am most reflective of the people in this district, and I will go to Washington and I will fight for you, and you know that your voice will be heard.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas.
For me, this race is not about redistricting. I was the only candidate who declared to run against Gwen Graham under the old lines because I believe that the people of this district deserve to be heard. We deserve to protect the American dream. And that's why we actually have been traveling 1,800 miles plus on the car every single week, meeting with farmers, people in the logging and timber industry, riding horses, herding cows, learning about the people in our district. They're not being represented in Washington. The lobbyists and the special interest groups are being represented, and we need to fight against that. That's why I support Donald Trump, because he's an outsider just like me, and he's willing to stand up to the establishment and stand up for what our country needs. We need freedom. We need to get back to the Constitution, and we need to defend Christianity. That's what I'm going to do in Congress, and I stand with Donald Trump.
Thank you, ma'am. And Mr. Sakai, you got last word.
Here's the deal, and here's what happens in every race in a district like this. Everybody runs as a conservative. It's easy to memorize a script. It's easy to parrot what needs to be heard in this district. There's only one candidate here who has actually fought on the front lines in every one of the key issues affecting us in this race. Terrorism, I put them in jail. Immigration, I've enforced the immigration laws and put illegal immigrants in jail. Obamacare, I have fought Obamacare. Life issues, I fought for life issues fighting Planned Parenthood. I testified only 5 weeks ago before Congress on Planned Parenthood's sale of fetal body parts. The military, I fought for the military's right to have their ballots counted in the 2000 election when I represented President Bush against Gore. I'm the only candidate who has fought and demonstrated his commitment to these issues by a lifetime of fighting for them.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Moran, you'll be first on this question, and since the Donald's name was invoked, we'll go ahead and ask this one now. Vowing to possibly suspend immigration from certain countries and to possibly ban entirely Syrian refugees, Donald Trump is outspoken on his immigration stance. What are your thoughts about Trump's rhetoric and plan, and what do you feel is the correct course of action?
This is a nation of immigrants. I understand individuals' desires to come to this country. But their desire does not supersede this government's responsibility, one of its core constitutional responsibility, to protect its citizens. I'm sorry, but I will not vote for anything that puts our citizens at risk and put their safety ahead of the desires of someone that wants to come into this country.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas.
The issue of illegal immigration is deeply personal to me and my family. My parents came to this country legally. They were willing to follow the laws so that they could have a better life. So when President Obama issues illegal and unconstitutional amnesty to millions of illegal immigrants, it's an outrage to me, my parents, and the thousands of immigrants waiting in line to become Americans the legal way. I am the only candidate on this stage who spoke out against Syrian refugees when President Obama and the mayor of Tallahassee wanted to bring these unvetted refugees, many of whom may be radical Islamic terrorists, to our neighborhoods. We formed a petition that thousands of people, including many here in this room, signed to say, we want to keep our country safe. We need to completely halt immigration from countries that harbor support terrorism and terrorists. I took the lead on that. Donald Trump has followed suit.
Mr. Sakai.
Earlier today, Senator Jeff Sessions from Alabama endorsed me for this race. Senator Sessions heads the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration and National Defense and our national interest. He points out that in the last 5 years, 680,000 people from Muslim nations have been granted green cards to come into our country. And that if left to their own devices, this Congress will authorize another 680,000 in the next 5 years. If we keep going in this direction, we will soon be a country that is far surpassed by our foreign and indeed Muslim population than our own population. This has got to stop. And I think that's part of the reason that Jeff Sessions, the senator from Alabama, endorsed my candidacy.
Thank you, sir. And Dr. Dunn, you've got last word on this question.
Thank you. My feeling is that immigration is a privilege, not a right. And it is indeed the first duty of our nation, our government, to protect our people and our country and our children from abuses and shipping in hazards from overseas. This president has made a mockery of our immigration laws. He has incentivized and invited foreigners to illegally enter our nation and get health care, education, and given them sanctuary cities to hide in. We need to remove those incentives. We need to protect our borders, secure them, and we need to control the immigration, in fact, ban the immigration of illegal and even legal people like this to our country.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas, you will start this next question. Many people agree that while they can live and let live as it pertains to LGBT-based agendas, they have a problem with the mainstreaming of that agenda and the forceful introduction of changes to our traditional Judeo-Christian lifestyle. That said, do you agree with President Obama in his mandate to force public schools to allow children to use any bathroom according to his or her sexual identity?
I absolutely do not agree with President Obama's plan. It's outrageous and unconscionable. He does not have the authority to allow boys to use girls' restrooms and to tie school funding for that. And as a mom of a 2.5-year-old son, I can't imagine a mom of a young daughter or parents of a young daughter or son having to encounter this. We need to remain firm and we need to stand up against that. I believe that all people have certain constitutional rights, but what's happening in our country is that a certain group of rights are being elevated above the rights of everyone else in our country. And as a strong Christian, I believe that I have certain First Amendment rights and freedom of speech rights. And those are being impeded upon every day in our country.
10 seconds.
We need to stand firm as Christians and conservatives and protect our constitutional rights. And we cannot allow these outrageous things to be happening in our children's schools.
Thank you, ma'am.
I agree with Mary, and I'm sure every other person on this panel, that this was outrageous. It's asinine that he thinks that he can, by edict, like some two-bit potentate, that he can just direct to us that we are supposed to allow our children to have access or be intruded upon by persons of the other sex. And what's really outrageous is that 165 members of Congress joined in pushing for a bill that would make that the law. And 45 of them were Republicans. And that's outrageous. So, I wrote to the governor. I urged that he direct his Department of Education to ignore that edict. I feel like if ever there's a time when Americans would rise up and say, no, we're not going to take this. We're not going to allow this. This would be that time. But, most of the school boards appear to, be, I guess money is thicker than
Thank you, sir. Dr. Dunn.
This is an example of Obama behaving like a dictator. This is the kind of thing that only somebody who thinks that he has ultimate control over every facet of your life would attempt to do something like that. Again, treating an executive directive as if it were a law and bypassing the entire legislative intent of the Constitution. He has demonstrated his utter contempt for all of us, and we should return the favor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, we don't agree with this. But let's think about what's really happening here. This is almost like a magician's sleight of hand. Why are we allowing the media and everyone else to control the news of the day? The magicians watch over here, as I'm really doing the magic here. Why are we dealing with this issue when we're facing $20 trillion in debt? Let's not fall for this. Let's not let these people continue to dictate what we're thinking about and what we're talking about. No, it's not a law. It shouldn't be. We can fix it. Like any criminal investigation, you always say follow the money. Well, why are we even looking at considering this? Is because we've allowed our tax dollars to go to the federal government, and then we have to beg and plead to get 40 cents on the dollar back. It's time we stop it and start paying attention
Thank you, sir.
to what's really important.
Mr. Sakai, you'll be first on this next question. Arguably, there are too many regulatory agencies, many times impeding progress in the areas in which they were originally designed to facilitate. What are your plans to cut some of these regulatory agencies and pave the way for enhanced progress in Florida's CD2?
Here's part of the problem. Congress will pass a statute, and the statute will be this long. And then the regulatory apparatus takes over. And they then become the bureaucracy. And they pass all types of regulations that are interpreting that statute. Now, my plan is to propose a bill in Congress that would require the agencies to report to Congress on a regular basis as to the regulations they have imposed, and to keep them in line. Now, the problem is, and believe me, I have represented individuals and corporations for the last 23 years since I left the U.S. Attorney's Office, fighting government regulation. And I can't tell you how many times we've had that conversation. The timekeeper's mean. He just, the way he snaps that out. No, but we've been, I can't tell you how many times we've had the conversation where
Thank you, sir. There's a reason we picked Mr. Butler to be our timekeeper. Dr. Dunn.
Thank you very much. There are a number of regulatory agencies that we could start by shaving for the most obvious reasons that they're doing a terrible job and they're harming us. Education comes to mind. We can shrink EPA vastly. We can move the Department of Energy functions into commerce and keep only a small part of it. But the point of it is to regain control of the regulatory agencies. Congress can do this. We say you can't fire a federal employee. You can fire a federal employee, and we need to make that easier. You can get control of the budget year after year after year. You can deny agencies money when they spend it the wrong way. And I think we need to go back up there and get control of these agencies and the budgeting process on an annual basis. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran.
They're right. The thing is that legislation is already in process. That's called the REINS Act. It passed the House and it was dropped in the Senate last month and is sitting there. And this is how we take control back. But I tell you, this is not just a theory to me. I live it. As a small business owner that actually deals in auto bodies and paint and some of these things that they regulate, I know what it's like to have these overreaching government agencies come in and come with us versus them mentality. And they're trying to harm the small business owner. This is the backbone of this nation. It's time we put a stop to that. This isn't a theory. I'm going to go up there and I'm going to make sure that we rein some of these individuals back in. I'll make sure
10 seconds.
when after that REINS Act, if it comes out of the Senate, if it doesn't make it, we'll introduce it again and let's fix this.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas.
In Governor Scott's administration, I worked to go line by line through agency rules to eliminate unnecessary, burdensome, and duplicative regulations. And we eliminated thousands of regulations and got Florida's economy back on the right track and made Florida a more business-friendly climate. We need to bring this to the federal level. And as a constitutional conservative, I believe that there are only certain activities delineated for the federal government. And we need to bring back state and local control where it belongs. We need to get rid of the IRS, the EPA, and the Department of Education and bring this control back to our state and local governments. With the Department of Education, there is no federally, constitutionally delineated activity for the federal government with education.
10 seconds.
We need to bring control back to the parents and teachers where it belongs, so that these people will be accountable to the parents and teachers.
Time.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Dunn, you will be first on this next question. There has been arguably no appreciable economic development in Washington County in which we find ourselves tonight for the past 10 years. What can you, as Florida Congressional District 2 representative, what can and will you do about this?
I have been serving on Governor Scott's Enterprise Florida Board for the last couple of years. We've been working very hard to try to bring to the rural areas of North Florida some opportunities to start manufacture and distribution supply. I would obviously continue that work from the Congressional office should I be elected. I think that we can make that more possible from Washington. Right now the efforts are coming mostly from the state, and you have some great people right here in Washington County working on your behalf to bring businesses to Washington County. And I hope that you continue to support these people in the Chamber of Commerce to build your infrastructure and to make it more invitable to have businesses come here. Certainly I would be in favor of helping you with infrastructure in every way possible. And I have experience in that area doing exactly that. I work on Bay and County CTA as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran.
Let's stop looking to government to fix our problems. Pretty typical, government will create a problem and then they'll send candidates up there and tell you this is how I'm going to fix them. Government doesn't create jobs. Entrepreneurs, business owners, we create jobs. The only thing that the government should have to do with job creation is creating an infrastructure where you'll have people like myself, some of the people in this audience that are willing to come in and risk their own capital and build a business. I would like to go back a little bit about these regulatory agencies, and I've got to ask you a question. How many years have we heard people stand up here and tell you that they're going to eliminate a federal agency? There's not been a single one eliminated in our lifetime.
10 seconds.
Let's not do this. Let's not fool ourselves. Let's do what we can do and not make promises we can't keep.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas.
Well, I believe we've had enough in Washington of people not having lofty ideals. That's why we haven't gotten anything done in Washington, because people are not fighting for true wholesale conservative reform. And I am the only candidate up here who has put forth a comprehensive pro-growth economic plan. That plan includes cutting spending, cutting wasteful spending, cutting regulations, and also implementing tax reform. We need to look at adopting a flat or fair tax. And what we need to do is we need to allow a corporate tax of 14.5%. So corporations and businesses will be able to keep more of the money that they own, they'll be able to hire people, and we will create true economic growth. And we need to look at getting some good vocational programs in our rural counties. People need to learn these skills. Not everyone needs or wants to go to college and incur hundreds of thousands of loans. And some of my biggest supporters are small business owners, plumbers and electricians.
And you have final word on this question, Mr. Sakaya.
Thank you. I know you're all are dying to hear what the rest of that conversation was that I had with my clients that I was telling you about. But you know, often we would talk with each other, and I've heard this over the years so many times, where a client will say, "Can you believe this is the country we're living in? That this is America?" Because the regulations are so oppressive, and you are required to do so many different things just to stay in business. And you spend so much of your time trying to fight those regulations rather than being productive. But I would note that there are 24,856 people that reside in Washington County. Unfortunately, 5,556 are gainfully employed. So we have a serious issue, not just in this county, but in many of the counties in our district. And I think it is true that I better stop at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran, you will start this next round of questions. Since Ms. Thomas brings up the high cost of education, we'll ask this question next. We're enjoying what is laughingly called the boomerang generation. Many of our four-year college students going to school, coming back home, $110,000 or more in school debt, and then coming back home and living with mom and dad because they have no marketable skills or no opportunity for real jobs. Here in the town in which we find ourselves today, Chipley, we enjoy Florida Panhandle Technical College, a career in a year within 12 months, the opportunity to get a real career, a real job, upwards of $30,000 after 1 year of training versus coming back with school debt and not being able to find a job. In your role as representative from CD2, is there an opportunity, and if so, what will you do to try to help fund more of these technical schools and start producing people who are ready to, who are job ready and ready to go out there and enter that workforce and become taxpayers?
Again, this isn't just a theory for me. I employ those people. I know what the welding school can produce. But you know what we've not done is we've taken way too many of these trade schools out of the high schools. Let's get those back in high schools. Let's teach our young men and women that it's okay to make a living with your hands. Callus is here. It didn't hurt anybody, okay? There's nothing wrong with that. That's what built this country. Let's get that education back in schools, back to where our young men and women can come out and be productive. Everyone talks about reducing the tax rate and bringing jobs back here. What we have to remember, though, is if you don't have the trained individuals to do those jobs, it doesn't matter what the tax rate will be. Yes, I would enjoy a lower tax rate, but let's get some qualified, skilled people here that I can give jobs to.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas.
Well, I feel that most of the funding for vocational programs actually resides with the state. And in the federal government, we're $19 trillion in climbing in debt. One thing that we can do is we can get rid of the Department of Education. And a lot of that money we can bring back to the state and local governments and let them use as they see fit. Obviously, I think that vocational schools are very, very important to not only our country, but especially to the 2nd District. So we need to work to develop those programs. But most importantly, we need to bring manufacturing back, because even if we have those vocational schools, we have no manufacturing because our corporate taxes are as high as 40%. We're driving corporations out of their country. And part of my comprehensive pro-growth economic plan includes having lower corporate taxes, 14.5%, and also allowing corporations to repatriate their money back to the United States at a 0% rate. This is going to allow for job creation and economic growth like we have not seen in decades.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Sakai.
It's shocking to me, and I'm sure it was to you, that some 53% of every adult under 30 looks favorably at socialism. And if you stop and think about what our education system has done, for years and years, this has been the problem. The professors just drill this into the students. For instance, when I was in school, we had a problem with an oil crisis. The professor says, simple, we nationalize. And, you know, I didn't agree. I was the oddball. There is a problem we're spending all this money for political sensitivity courses and reviewing the mating habits of the African bees. That's where we are spending this money, this massive amount on our education system. We ought to be spending it for something more practical like welding and the vocational schools.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Dunn.
Thank you. I'm a huge advocate for the trade schools and the community colleges and the state colleges. My wife sits on the board of 2 of them in our own town. We have done a lot of fundraising for them over the years. But the thing that makes it for a better job environment is a growing economy. We have to have a growing economy. If that happens, that economy will inform the trade schools and the K-12 schools, and all the universities, what we need our people trained in. The only obstacle to growth in America is bad government policy. I want to say that again. The only obstacle to economic growth in America is bad government policy. We can make good policy, we can make clear-headed choices about taxes and regulations, and the economy will take off like a shot. That's what we need.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas, you will start this next round. Since the inception of Roe v. Wade, abortion has been one of the hot buttons for political campaigns. What is your stance on abortion, and do you believe in exceptions for abortion?
As a strong Christian and the mom of a 2.5-year-old son, I am ardently pro-life, at life at all of its stages, and I do not support abortion, and I do not support any exceptions to abortion. We need to immediately defund Planned Parenthood. Taxpayers should not be paying for the killing of millions of innocent babies and for the brutal harvesting of their baby body parts. I spoke out against this when I saw that Gwen Graham had received over $5,500 in Planned Parenthood funds. I called on her to return those funds. And then I saw her at a North Florida parade, and I told her that I'm praying for her to return that Planned Parenthood money. That is the same type of person that we need in Washington. Someone who is unafraid and who will stand up and always stand for life. That's why I've been endorsed by the largest pro-life group in the nation, the Susan B. Anthony list, because they know that I will always be a strong and vocal advocate for life.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Sakai.
I am strongly pro-life. I have been all my life. And when I look at the Roe v. Wade decision, I think it's outrageous that the court said, and I quote, they said, "We need not decide the difficult question of when life begins." And I feel like, well, wait a second. If you can't decide, then why are you saying that it can be taken? So I strongly believe that life within the womb is life, and that when you're dealing with little ones who feel pain, who have brain waves, whose hearts are beating, that it's outrageous that 58.5 million unborn children have been taken from the womb since Roe v. Wade. And I feel so strongly about it that I have indeed fought them on the front lines on these very issues, including recently in Washington.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Dunn.
Thank you. I too have been pro-life all my life, not just for the campaign. I'm Catholic. I want to put this in context for you. I'm a surgeon, and in the specialty that I practice, which is urology, it is the most common reason for in vivo surgery, that is in utero surgery, where we operate on babies who are unborn. That typically, the ideal time for that to occur is between 12 and 15 weeks of pregnancy. And we would, believe me, agonize over intervening in a pregnancy because we're terribly afraid we might precipitate a problem. But we were fortunate. We saved a lot of young lives, and I was fortunate enough to practice that long enough and see these children being born and born healthy with their kidneys saved. So the question to me of whether or not a child in the womb is a child in the womb, a human being, not a choice, is there is no thought process there. They're a child, and I feel strongly about that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran.
This answer is very easy for me. It's guided by my faith. Life begins at conception, period. There are no exceptions. That's it. This gives me time to go back to the question beforehand. Talk about trade schools and what we're doing about the high cost of college. I'm the only one up here without a professional degree. I've done okay. College wasn't for me. I went back to school as I was working in the police department. But we need to tell our people that it's okay. You can still succeed. You can be successful. You can drive nice cars without going to college and coming out with a massive debt. You know, there's nothing wrong with working with your hands, but there is something wrong with having $100,000 worth of school debt and no good job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sakaya, you'll be first on this next question. As long as there are a huge number of people receiving monthly welfare checks and entitlements, the Democrat Party will continue to curry favor. If by some stroke of misfortune Hillary Clinton becomes our 44th president, what can we expect your plan of action to become and your biggest challenge at that point?
Well, I noted that some 30 states pay more to their welfare recipients than they would receive getting minimum wage. And, you know, there's something wrong when there's a culture of welfare, a culture of receiving. I toured a facility the other day in which most of the persons who use the services were on welfare. And they said it goes back 3 and 4 generations. I think our system that rewards mothers of children to not have the fathers in the home is wrong. I think a system that offers people more funding and hope by sitting at home and receiving a check rather than working is wrong. So I would focus on changing the system to one that promoted and encouraged productivity.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Dunn.
Thank you. I too think that the system has been perverted and it disincentivizes work, saving, and investment. Clearly, it pays many, many people better to sit at home. Your question was, what about if Hillary Clinton becomes president? I have to say, I got goosebumps when you asked that question. But the answer is you really do have a terrible problem there, and that's why we all have to go out and vote for a Republican president. I don't care what you think of the Republican candidate. You need to vote Republican, because if you don't vote Republican, you're going to lose your Constitution. You're going to lose your country. We don't have another 4 years to readdress this question. This is it. This is our last chance to save America, the America we grew up in. Please, I implore you, vote Republican for president and tell everybody you know and threaten them if they don't, because this is it, the last opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran.
There's a lot of talk about the presidency here. Let's remember that if Congress will go up and do their job and take on the hard fight, even when it's not popular, it doesn't matter who sits in that seat. It is our responsibility to make this sure that this country stays on track. And the only way you're going to do that is you're going to go up there and you're going to make some unpopular decisions. I don't want to go to Washington to make friends. I'm not going to go to Washington to see what kind of money I can get and what kind of power I can amass. That's not what this is about. Our founding fathers laid out the House of Representatives to reflect the people back here. And until we go up there and we start taking these hard choices and take control of our government back, we're going down the wrong road, and I'm telling you, I will not take you down that path.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas, you will finish up this round.
I have had to work hard for everything that I've achieved, and my parents have had to as well. They had no money when they came to this country, but through hard work, self-sufficiency, and perseverance, they started a successful medical practice. And that's what we need to instill in young people today. We need to get the federal government out of the way and empower people to be able to learn and to be able to work hard and earn their own living. We need to focus on our families. We need to focus on getting back to church. We need to focus on our morals. And we need to focus on getting back to the free market and getting the federal government out of our lives. Without that, we're going to continue to have this system where people are dependent upon the government. That's not what our founders intended for our country. And I will fight against the system. Able-bodied people need to be working in this country.
Thank you, ma'am. By the way, it's not too late if you'd like to submit a question in writing and pass it up this way. We may have the opportunity to ask a few more, so if you have any questions that have come to mind in the course of the conversation, please do so.